And he has done, I don't know if it's similar things, but he's sort of told some stories that don't line up quite like this before.
Yeah, this president has a pattern at this point of either inventing or embellishing stories about his own past, his biography. He did it 3 times in one speech last month alone. He claimed he had witnessed a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh when he actually showed up about 6 hours later.
I watched that bridge collapse. I got there and saw it collapse with over 200 feet off the ground going over a valley. It collapsed.
He claimed that his grandfather had died just days before he was born himself at the same hospital. In fact, his grandpa died more than a year before in a different state, not the same hospital.
Think about it this way. My grandpa, who I never met, he died in the same hospital I was born in 2 weeks before I was born.
And he also repeated a favorite false story that I and others have debunked over and over again about a supposed conversation with an Amtrak train conductor he was friends with, who was actually deceased at the time the conversation would have had to take place.
So I'm getting on a train to go home and see my mom, who was sick and in hospice at my home. And this guy, I won't mention his name because I will get him in trouble. I'm not going to embarrass him and say his name. Angelo Negri. And Angelo Negri came up, but one of the senior guys in Amtrak, who I rode with all the time, comes up and goes, "Joey, baby! Joey, baby! Joey, baby! Hey, Joe. Joey, baby! Joey, baby! Joey, baby! Joey, baby!" He grabs my cheek. Swear to God, I thought they were going to shoot him. And I said, no. I said, "What's the matter, Angie?" He said, I read this thing about over 1 million miles on Air Force planes. He said, "Hell, you know how many miles you travel on Amtrak?" I said, "No, Angie, I don't know." He said, "We just had a retirement dinner up in Newark." He said, "You traveled average 117 days a year. 119 days a year. 131 days a year. 222 days a year. Round trip, 300 miles a day. 36 years, that's 1,285,000 miles. I traveled over 2 million miles in Amtrak." He said, 1,200,000 miles. And I've traveled millions of miles. You traveled over 2 million miles. You've traveled over 1 million miles on Amtrak. 1,200,000 miles. 1,515,000 miles on Amtrak. I don't want to hear any more about the Air Force. True story.
And that's not all. There are some more serious ones in my view. Previously in his presidency, he claimed at one point he'd been arrested during a civil rights protest when, in other versions of the story, he just said an officer had taken him home from a protest.
I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robben Island. I came back from South Africa trying to see Nelson Mandela and getting arrested for trying to see him on Robben Island. He was in prison. When I said arrested, I meant I was not able to move. Cops, Afrikaners would not let me go with them, made me stay where I was. I guess I wasn't arrested. I was stopped. I was not able to move where I wanted to go.
He said he had visited the Pittsburgh synagogue where worshipers were killed in a 2018 mass shooting. In fact, he had actually spoken to the rabbi, but never went.
I remember spending time at going to the Tree of Life synagogue, speaking with them. It just is amazing these things are happening.
He said at one point, Republicans like to bring this up, he said that he used to drive a tractor trailer, he used to drive an 18-wheeler. Never happened. The White House later clarified he used to drive a school bus at one point as a job briefly. School bus, of course, not an 18-wheeler.
I remember, I'm going to digress for 1 second. I got a commercial license because my dad used to run an automobile agency. And I used to have to go up to the body shop up in Philadelphia from Wilmington. And when they'd order a trailer or a cab, they'd sell the cab. And so I had to have a license to be able to drive it up and back. And so during the trucker strike years later, when I was a young senator, there was a guy who ran steel from Deemer Steel out to Ohio. And so I decided to ride out with him, see what it was like on the strike. And I was driving, going through Shiloh, Ohio. And his handle was Big 10. And remember, everybody, all the truck stops were being blockaded at the time during the strike. And he called. He said, "Big 10 wanting to come in." I forget exactly how he said it. And the only woman truck driver I ever knew I met that day, she said, "This is Big Mama, no room." Swear to God, true story. Swear to God. He said, I've got a United States Senator driving my truck. She said, I got the damn president in mind, so what? I'll never forget that. I was a very powerful guy. Anyway, that was the first woman trucker I met.
So whatever his intentions, whether it's foggy memory about stuff that's going on decades ago or deliberate embellishment, this is an unfortunate pattern that keeps coming up again and again with Joe Biden.
I you might say, raised in the synagogues of my state. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. But back in Wilmington, Delaware, Beth Shalom was a home of countless friends for me. Rabbi Michael Beals of the congregation Beth Shalom in Wilmington, Delaware. That's where I received my education. I probably went to shul more than many of you did. You all think I'm kidding. We have a very, in relative terms, large Puerto Rican population in Delaware. I was sort of raised in the Puerto Rican community at home. I was, as a young man, I was born in a coal town of Scranton, Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, in an Irish Catholic neighborhood. Then when Cole died, we moved down to Delaware, to a town called Claymont, Delaware, which was a working class town. And but everyone in town was either Polish or Italian. I grew up feeling self-conscious. My name didn't end in an S-K-I or an O. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. I got started out of an HBCU, Delaware State. Now, I don't want to hear anything negative about Delaware State here, okay? They're my folks.
When I was 17 years old, like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else.
John, in the past couple of weeks, the president has lied about being at Ground Zero the day after the September 11th attacks, falsely claimed he saw the Pittsburgh Bridge collapse, claimed his grandfather died in the hospital days before his birth. What is going on with the president? Is he just believing things that didn't happen did happen, or is he just randomly making stuff up?
The president was deeply touched and honored to be able to spend 9/11 with military members there in Alaska and some families, and was honored by their presence and the chance to make an important set of remarks about why we need to continue to remember that day, and he did that, and he spoke about a visit to Ground Zero, which he did participate in, about a week or so after the event.
Ground Zero in New York. And I remember standing there the next day and looking at the building. I felt like I was looking through the gates of hell. It looked so devastating because from where you could stand.
The senator is recognized.
Mr. President, I can't think of any other legislative body in the world where you would hear the speech you just heard by the junior senator from Virginia.